Welcome back to the Flint Catholic Podcast. Today we're going to discuss the situation at Michigan State, and then after the break, we're going to talk about my recent trip to the Eternal City, to Rome. Next on the Flint Catholic Podcast. All right, welcome back. I'm Father Tony Smila.
Patrick Brennan.
All right, so we're going to start with a pretty heavy topic today, and hopefully after the break we'll lighten it up a little bit. But recently we just all witnessed the mass shooting that happened at Michigan State, and we're seeing this happen a lot in our country, and we're seeing so much ink being spilt over. What's the cause of it? What's happening? Why is this starting to happen? And it's the right question to ask, right? Why?
Right.
Why do we see this uptick in violence? Why are we seeing all of these events happening one after another after another?
Yeah, especially when it's close to home, or when it's at home. That's when these why questions surface the deepest. So let's dive into it.
Well, especially here, we've had multiple that have been very close to home, and there's been, I know this made national news. But there are students at Michigan State who were present at the building in Oxford when that shooting happened. So now they've gone through this twice in their life, which is crazy to think about. Yeah. But it is important to go over, okay, what's going on here? And I know some people can get really tired of it because it's, I think a lot of the conversation that our culture is having is the wrong conversations. And you see it happen over and over again. Oh, you just got to do this. You just got to do this. And boom, that'll solve everything. And of course, we know none of these difficult issues are going to be solved by just, the perfect piece of legislation, or, that's not the issues here. What I want to do is I want to ground this conversation in a piece that Anthony Esselin wrote. He's a really, I think, insightful thinker, writer. I got this, I think, from Crisis magazine. I'm pretty sure it was from Crisis where I got this from. And he actually wrote this months and months ago. I think he wrote this back in the summer, so this is before Michigan State. And he wrote an article called "Behind the Motives of Mass Shooters."
Okay.
And I think this is a good way to ground our conversation here. So he says, when this happens, we ask the questions why, and a common way to do it is, okay, means, motive, and opportunity. Right, especially when you're trying to convict somebody in court of law, right? Those are what you're looking for: the means, the motive, and opportunity. Did this person have the means? Did they have the motive? And did they have the opportunity to commit this crime?
Sure.
And so when we look at the why from this question, I think that can be very helpful as well. When we see people on Twitter, and I was on Twitter during that whole thing happening and seeing all of these questions come up, and so some people look at the means. And I think this is where we commonly see a lot of people reacting, is the means. Well, if this person didn't have the means to commit this crime, then that's the issue. That too many people have the means. Too many people have guns. And if we just get rid of the means of the attack, then all the problems will go away, right? So if we just get rid of the guns, that's gonna be it. And of course, as Christians, I think we can pretty safely say, well, no, that's not going to get rid of it. In England, London in particular, they pretty much have banned weapons over there. And what's happened? Knife attacks have skyrocketed, right? So I don't think the problem lies in the means. So then, okay, well, let's look at the opportunity, right? The person saw there was an opportunity there. So what do? We just post armed guards everywhere. And we just, give more people guns, and that'll get rid of the opportunity for them, that moment, right? So you see the gun-free zones, right? They look at the gun-free zones and they're like, this is a soft target we can attack. Now, certainly we should protect people, right? But that's not going to solve this issue either. The issue goes much deeper than that. There's always going to be some place, some opportunity somewhere. There's always going to be soft zones somewhere, right? So you can focus on the opportunity of it, but I don't think that's going to solve the issue either. And so you see kind of, if you want to look at it politically, like the right and the left, one side looks at the means, one side looks at the opportunity, and I think it's the motive. That's the one we really need to pay attention to. And this is the hardest one to really look at, because evil comes from the heart.
Yep.
Evil comes from the heart, and when we look at these situations, there's so much brokenness in the human heart, so much brokenness. It's got to be a tremendous amount of brokenness that leads a person to commit such a violent act like this, right? 'Cause it's not society forming them in a certain way. It's certainly not video games that does this to people. It's the human heart. It's brokenness in the human heart that does this. It's the family, right? The destruction of the family in our culture can lead to a lot of this. It's social media that can lead a person to a place where either they hate themselves, they hate the world, they become mentally ill because of social media. I know that social media is a cause of mental illness in our country, and I'm not afraid to say that. And a lot of it should be banned. And we see so really what we need to do is look at the heart, look at the human heart, look at the causes in that way. And I only just named a couple of different things there, but I'm sure there's more. And I think that's what makes this problem so complex, is that there's no one like magic bullet to do this, right?
Right.
And really at the heart of it all, it's Jesus that needs to do the work in our own hearts. What we see is a tremendous lack of the Lord in all of this, and the lack of the Lord in our society, the lack of the Lord in being able to change and transform lives, that even out of the brokenness of our lives, we can rise up and we can give hope. I think that's it. When somebody gets to a place where they've lost hope, that's when now the door is open for such awful evil to occur.
Yeah.
It's a loss of hope. And as Christians, that's what we hold on to, the hope that even though our lives may be a complete and utter and total mess, that hope of Jesus Christ always sustains it. It is always there. When I use the word hope, when we use the word hope in a Christian context, we're not using it in the way that I hope the Lions one day win the Super Bowl. Because we know that, well, I used to be able to say that was impossible, but I don't know. I've got a little bit of Lions hope right now. But even that hope is different than the hope we're talking about in a Christian context. Because what we hope in is something that we can have confidence in, like extreme confidence in. It's the victory of Jesus Christ on the cross. It's his victory there, which will then lead to total victory in the end. And that's the hope we hold on to, that Jesus will indeed have total victory in the end. And we know that because he walked out of that tomb on Easter Sunday. Yeah. That he walked out of the tomb and proved to us and to the world that he conquered death. He defeated death and sin on the cross, and we can participate in that victory of his. And that's the hope we hold on to, no matter what our family situation looks like, no matter how much we've been wounded by other people, we've taken wounds ourselves, no matter how difficult life can get, that we hold on to that Christian hope that in the end, Jesus will have total victory.
Yeah, and you know what it makes me think of is the hope, that Christian hope, it goes deeper than, say, our family background, our socioeconomic status, our educational level, whatever the measuring stick is in terms of a good life in the eyes of society. If you have Christian hope, you don't necessarily have to have all those other good things in order to make life work well, because I think there's a pressure on humanity when something like this happens. Like, okay, how can we fix this to make sure it never happens again? And it's like you're saying, there's so many variables that would have to come into place, and there's so many different things to ensure the flourishing of a community. But if the foundation is God, then the flourishing will come from that foundation. But if we're trying to flourish without God, right, it's like we cannot handle that Rubik's Cube.
Yeah.
And we're not supposed to.
Right. Not meant to be that way. Yeah, I often say, I hate the phrase God won't give you more than you can handle. I hate that phrase. Because it's just, hate that phrase. It's not true. It's not true. So often in our lives, if we take an honest look at our lives, we're like, man, this is way more than I can handle. way more than I can handle. And it's because we're not meant to handle it alone. We're not meant to go at it alone. We're meant to do that with Jesus. We're meant to, fully depend on him. Like, we can't depend on him if we never have the opportunity to depend on him, right? And so, yeah, we're oftentimes brought to a place where we need to be humbled, need to be brought to a place where, like, I can't do this on my own. I give up.
That kind of reminds me of a Lent, like that's the whole thing of Lent. Like, we fast and like give up things to learn to depend on God more.
That's exactly right. I mean, especially for fasting for me, man, I hate giving up food.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I hate fasting. I like food a lot. And so, like, every day, like, I'm fasting, it's like, all right, Lord, I really need you today. Because I'm hungry and that cheeseburger looks really good and I know I can't have it today.
Yeah. And, another word that comes to mind is, and we've all experienced this at some moments in our life, that feeling of being overwhelmed, right? So, I mean, I don't know what it's like to be on the verge of committing a crime. I'm sure it's a sense of I'm overwhelmed, but just as someone that's experienced the overwhelming nature of the tasks of life or the sadness of circumstances or whatever, we've all experienced that. And so it's like, what do you do with your overwhelm? Do you allow it to kind of control your response and take you to a place of crippling anxiety or whatever the fruit of that overwhelm is? But I think, not that phrase, obviously we don't like that phrase, God can't doesn't give you what you can't handle, but maybe the spirit behind it is, once you've given yourself over to God, then whatever comes is no longer has a power over me that's greater than the power within me.
Yeah, it's interesting as you're saying that. It's like I'm thinking this is how the evil one wants to work. Not only does he want to overwhelm us, but then he wants us to not turn to the Lord and then triple the amount of overwhelmed feeling by bringing us anxiety, by bringing us despair and depression and all of these things. He compounds the feeling of being overwhelmed by with all of that muck and gunk in our own hearts, and then that just can spiral us out of control. That's the traditional playbook of the evil one.
Yeah, and man, I mean, we could do a little scripture analysis of Cain and Abel.
Yeah,
and how God says to Cain, like, hey, why are you crestfallen? Sin's knocking at the door, but you can be its master. And God is saying, like, Cain, if you turn to me, you don't have to give in to this. I don't know what the literal translation of the word crestfallen is. I'm sure there's some fancy Hebrew word there that we could talk about, but it just makes me think, like, God is saying to all of us who are tempted to darkness, like, it doesn't have to be this way.
Yeah. I tend to think of Mary Magdalene in a subject like this, where she was, like, at that low point in her life, completely, like, overwhelmed in every aspect of her life, and that's the moment the Lord breaks in. And she had a choice in that moment. She could have said, no thanks, I'm going to do this myself. But she didn't. She turned to the Lord in that moment. She turned to the Lord. I love the portrayal in The Chosen, too, of that scene where he calls her by name. And it shakes her to her core.
I love that scene.
Yeah, it's so good, right? And it's because he's breaking through that anxiety. He's breaking through that despair that she feels in her life. And she reaches out to him in that moment. And she says, okay, I'm going to let you carry that. And she's a completely different person on the other side of that. Yes. Like, everything about her completely changes in that moment. And then you look at a character like Judas on the other side, right? Who maybe was probably trying to do the right thing, do what he thought was right, trying to, bring Jesus to a place where he's going to call the kingdom forward finally. And it doesn't work out. And all of a sudden Jesus has now been killed. And now what do you do with that? He clearly makes a mistake and clearly understands the gravity of what he's done. And the Lord didn't abandon him in that moment either. Instead, he he turns away from the Lord, and he does not accept the Lord continuing to reach out to him.
Yeah, and I think a question that people could ask when you have a shooting or some other tragedy is, well, why didn't God intervene?
Mm-hmm.
You know, if God's all powerful, why didn't he stop it? And the scandal, and I use scandal in quotation marks, is that God has made us so free. He's made us so free. And if I were God, I wouldn't have the guts to make my creatures, my children, this free.
Yeah.
But he makes us so free that if we, like we're saying, if we don't build our society on the foundation of God, God's not saying, I don't want that, right? Like, I'm just going to let that happen, like a bad father who's just absent.
Right.
Right? But he's saying, I can't force my way in because love doesn't force.
Right.
And so he waits for us to call out to him. And it is, man, it's a very weighty thing when you think about our human lives and just how free we truly are to turn to darkness or to light.
Yeah. And so to perhaps start to put a bow on this conversation, we can look at like answers to this in a local and in a broader environment. And in the local environment is like we need to look at our own place in our own heart where we turn away from the Lord, right? Where is that darkness that resides in our own heart, and work like crazy to root out that darkness and that sits in our own heart, and really making sure that, hey, whenever, I come upon difficult times, or, stress comes up, anxiety comes up, I'm calling it out and I'm giving it over to the Lord every time, because we can think, oh, I would never do something like that. Well, but for the grace of God, so go I, right? It's, I can't say that I would never do something like that, because that's where despair leads people, and I very easily could fall into all of that as well. I mean, how many figures in the church have fallen due to sins of various sorts. So we have to continue to go to the Lord, go to him, and especially in the sacraments, and to continue to root out the darkness in our own heart. That's the internal look. Then we have to look outside as well, and we need to this is really the urgency of evangelization. If we want to root this out in our own culture, this is a culture that has to be centered on God again. We have to bring Jesus and God back into our culture. This is what for America's history, we didn't shy away from having God be a central aspect of everything we do. And I think we need to return to that. It's been a huge mistake to root God out from the public sphere. And I think we're seeing the consequences of that. And so the urgency of evangelization, the urgency of showing the world that you may be overwhelmed, but there's hope in the midst of that, and proclaiming hope to a world that needs hope. That's when we're evangelizing, that can be a word we can really take advantage of and shout from the rooftops, hey, there's hope here. You can have hope here, not just a silly hope, but a deep and a kind of hope that we can really rely on and build a foundation upon.
Yeah, I mean, the beautiful thing is that no matter what situation or state our culture is in, or the world, or particular events, Jesus is still Lord, still alive, still conquering the enemy. And it's a matter of, are we going to allow him to do that in each of our lives?
Yeah, absolutely. Start with us. It all starts right here in my own heart.
Amen.
Amen. All right, that was a good conversation.
Yeah.
That was good. After the break, we are going to talk about my recent trip to Rome. I just got back a few days ago, and I'll share some highlights. We'll see you on the other side. Welcome back to the Flint Catholic Podcast. So I just recently came back from Rome, and it was pretty sweet. So I was on pilgrimage with St. Catherine's Academy, and we spent 6 days, spent about a day and a half in Siena, and then a day in Assisi, and then the rest of our time in Rome. Got to see the Pope, which was cool.
How close?
Actually, so he came up the aisle, and I was probably about 8 feet from him.
Whoa.
I know.
Were you tempted to reach out and?
I was. Let's just say there were a lot of people who were very uncomfortably close to me in that moment, and it was difficult. And so I barely got a glimpse through like 3 people. I was 2 people from the edge. I was that guy. So I was on pilgrimage with 25 high schoolers and a bunch of parents, and so I was kind of the guy on the edge who was like boxing everybody else out. So I took one for the team. I've seen the Pope before, so I wanted the high schoolers to get a chance to be right there up against the rail.
Yeah,
I'm considering transferring to St. Catherine Academy now.
You're considering transferring to an all-girls high school?
Dang it, right.
Yeah. Sorry
Well,
about that.
you could work there someday.
I could work there?
You could. We
Yeah.
we know a bunch of people who work there now.
Yeah.
So a bunch of former seminarians work there.
Really?
Evan,
Oh
Fam,
man. How about
and
that?
Tom Merlot.
Wow.
I know, right?
Dang.
Yeah.
So what would you say was there an adventurous? What was maybe the adventure part of the trip, and then maybe like a lasting memory or something that sticks out?
Good question. So, what I liked about this pilgrimage, the way it's set up, is there was a few days where like you had the afternoon off. Like you get lunch on your own, spend a few hours, and just go. There's a few things you can do, and I've kind of done all of those things. This is my 3rd time doing that pilgrimage, so I've done all those things, and I've done the cupola tour, which is really, really cool. If you ever get a chance to go to Rome, you want to do the cupola tour. That gets you. So you go up the dome of St. Peter's Basilica. And like at the halfway point, they let you off, and you are inside the bottom part of the dome, inside St. Peter's Basilica. And that's, to me, that's a really, really important thing to see, because it gives you a perspective of how big St. Peter's Basilica is. It's the biggest church in the world.
Really?
It is.
Wow.
It's the biggest church in the world. There is not a church in America that wouldn't fit comfortably inside. In fact, if you go up kind of the main aisle of St. Peter's Basilica, there's different stars along the way, and it's got the name of the church of where this is where that church would end if it was inside here.
Whoa.
This is the size of this church if it was to end here.
Is that
But-
flexing?
Is it what?
Is that flexing?
A little bit. So the biggest one in, I think, the States is Immaculate Conception in Washington, D.C. And it's about 2/3 of the way down of the main aisle at St. Peter's.
Woo.
It is huge. And it's interesting, too, when you walk into St. Peter's, you can't really tell because the proportions of that building are so perfect. It's just, you look at it and you're like, wow, it's huge. But then, like, getting the perspective from the cupola inside the dome, and you're looking down, then you can see, oh, this is, like, huge. This is massive. It is so big. And then once you're done there, you keep going up, and you're going, like, spiraling up inside the dome. And then you get up to the top, and you look out into St. Peter's Square and into the city of Rome.
Wow.
And it's incredible.
That
It's
is
an
amazing.
incredible view.
Why is it called the cupola?
I think the cupola just means roof or dome.
Oh,
So you're going up to the roof.
cool.
Yeah,
I need to go to Rome.
you do. It's awesome. So with the adventure, the question about the adventure.
Yeah.
I didn't do the cupola tour this time because I've done it a few times already. And so the adventure is just kind of walking around Rome. So I just spent like a few hours just like getting lost in Rome, intentionally just trying to get lost. And then, with Google Maps, you can always find your way back. So just like seeing all the different things, there are 650 churches inside the city of Rome itself. And so every time I saw a church, you just pop in. You never know what you're going to see. You walk into a church. Oh, there's St. Philip Neri right there. Walk into another church. There's the hand of St. Francis Xavier. That's in Jesu. And I love that his right hand is on display because it's like he is like the world record holder in baptisms.
Oh,
and
wow.
so we're like displaying the hand that baptized more people than anybody in human history,
That is
which
amazing.
I think is really cool.
Does it say where the rest of the body is? Just gotta
I
spread
don't
out.
think so, but it was in Italian, so
Okay.
couldn't really read it.
Do you have any idea how many baptisms he did do?
I think it was over 10,000.
Over 10,000. That's a
Yeah.
lot.
It's a lot. It was definitely over 9,000. That's right. I went there.
That's sweet.
So, yeah, there's just, there's so many surprises. And one of the cool things, actually, I was there on Fat Tuesday. And one of the cool Italian traditions is basically that's like the Italian Halloween.
Oh, wow.
Where all the kids are dressed up and they're celebrating. They're in costumes. And there's confetti like everywhere on the streets. It is amazing. In fact, I was at the steps of, which church was I at? I don't remember which church I was at. And I was just kind of on the steps outside and eating my lunch. And there's confetti everywhere, right? And so a street cleaner comes through and, spends 20 minutes just cleaning it up.
Sure.
And he leaves, and about 10 minutes later, a group of like 30 kids, must have been like an elementary school trip. They all went over to the steps into the piazza there, and they brought confetti, and they just they just messed up the place again. There was confetti everywhere again 20 minutes later.
Wow.
It was fantastic. It was very fun. So yeah, being there on Fat Tuesday, I had 4 servings of gelato.
Ho ho!
Because I knew that I was going to have 0 the next day. It was the lentiest start of Lent I have ever lented.
So are these like different flavors?
Yeah, gelato just means ice cream.
Yeah.
And like so there's a million gelato shops because Rome's known for its really good gelato. And like each place is going to have 20 to 30 different flavors. So, it's so good. It's so good.
And just give our listeners, how would you describe if you were to give the adjectives and the description of gelato, what would you say?
Yeah, it's better than American ice cream, and it's not even close. Two main differences are, I think the flavor is just better. They're really concerned about the flavors of it, and I think that the thing that really sets it apart is the consistency. It's very light. It doesn't sit like a rock in your gut like American ice cream does. American ice cream is very heavy, right? It's rich, it's heavy, but Italian gelato is light, and it is so you can have it and continue to keep walking. So you walk everywhere in Italy, and so you walk in and you have the gelato, and it's not a big deal, and it's awesome. It's so good.
That's amazing.
It's so good.
So do you have a lasting memory from this trip to Rome?
A lasting memory. There's always those moments that always stick out in your mind. One that I always pay attention to and make sure I'm always aware of in that moment is because the school is St. Catherine of Siena, we go to Siena, right? And we see St. Catherine, who is incorrupt. Well, at least some of St. Catherine. Her head is in Siena, and it is on display.
Wow.
And so the look of all the girls when they see the head of St. Catherine of Siena is a particular joy. Because some are very grossed out by it. Some are like, oh my gosh, is that it? What is that? Oh my gosh. And some of them are like really fascinated by it. And to be fair, it's kind of far away. And to also be fair, she's not looking all that great nowadays.
Yeah.
She's not looking awesome.
Okay.
When did St. Catherine die?
700 years ago.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I mean, she is incorrupt, but,
yeah, in comparison.
She hasn't done her makeup in a while.
In comparison, I mean, she's looking great to most people. She still, she still has the skin on her face, and, everything's, still intact, but it's just not looking all that great.
That's amazing.
For someone over 700, she looks pretty good.
She looks pretty good. Not bad. Not bad.
I like that line.
Not bad. I think a lasting memory of this one is something we added to the trip this year that we've never done before, and I got to see Blessed Carlo Acutis.
Really?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yep.
His body is displayed?
It is.
All right.
Now, I think it's still too early to tell whether he's incorrupt or not, but he's looking pretty good.
That's amazing.
Yeah, I have kind of a special affinity for him because he's actually younger than me. He was born after me. He'd be 31 today if he were still alive, which is amazing to think about. Someone so recent, right? Yeah. He was born 2 years after I was, and he's the patron saint of the internet. Well, he's going to be the patron saint of the internet.
Obviously.
He played Pokemon. We talked about this on the air.
Yeah.
Right? He's
so cool.
He's the saint who played Pokemon. I love it. He's great. So got to see him, which was really cool. Yeah, I mean, the trip's amazing. If you ever have a chance to get to Rome, you should get to Rome. Rome's really good.
I'm just imagining Pokemon in Italian, and
Oh my
that had
gosh.
to be fun.
Yes. Yes. No, and it was his desire to be buried in Assisi, so he's there in Assisi.
Oh.
He's not from Assisi, but that's where he's at. So
Cool.
yeah,
Cool.
it's very cool.
That's nice.
So I'd love to keep talking about Rome, but I know the bell just rang, and I know Pax has to get to class. What class do you have to get to now?
I have an algebra test.
Oh, gross. Oh, well,
do we have to go back?
I believe I need to get you off to that class. So.
All right.
So thanks for joining us this week. Hopefully next week we'll be on the air. We're going about every other week right now, so that's not a terrible clip, right?
Yeah, we're keeping the tradition alive.
That's right. So we will see you next time on the Flint Catholic Podcast.
God bless.